At the end of the book of Genesis, as Joseph's brothers approach him, worried he will hold a grudge for their mistreatment of him in the past, Joseph responds, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." A story of tragedy and conflict turning into triumph and reconciliation. A powerful reminder to each of us that God can use even the most hopeless situations to bring salvation to many. And at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. The pain and hardships and uncertainties we all face, those aren't the end. We're looking forward to a future promise, a greater purpose worked out by God. As the Apostle Paul writes in Romans 8:18, "I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us." And again in 8:28, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." And Paul, he was no stranger to suffering. Look at the list he gives us in 2 Corinthians chapter 11. Imprisonments, countless beatings, almost killed, shipwrecked 3 times, even spending a day adrift at sea, nights without sleep, days without food or water, even sickness. Like I shared in my email last week, Paul makes an interesting comment in his letter to the Galatians. He reminds them that the reason he went to Galatia in the first place was because of some illness he had. We don't know the full story about it, but it sounds like it had something to do with his eyes. Maybe he was having some kind of eye pain, or maybe he was even losing his vision. Whatever it was, it sounded like it was something rather unpleasant. But we know Paul was a guy who was doing miracles all over the place. Why can't he heal this illness he has? Yet sometime later, we see him write in 2 Corinthians 12, "In order to keep me from becoming conceited, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. But he said to me, 'My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness.' Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong." I sometimes wonder if this thorn Paul talks about here is the same illness he talks about to the Galatians. Suffering that he really didn't want in life. He asked God several times to take it away, but in the end accepted that it was part of God's plan. And you know what? It's okay for us to do the same thing. It's okay to ask God to take our suffering away. And it's okay to be sad or confused when God doesn't answer our prayers the way we were hoping. Paul had those kinds of moments, and I'm sure Joseph did too in those years he spent as a slave and in prison. Even Jesus prayed 3 times for his suffering to be taken away from him the night before he was crucified. But even during those times, we can take comfort in knowing that God hasn't forgotten us. We might not always see the purpose behind our suffering the way Paul and Joseph did, but faith allows us to press forward through the pain. And Paul gives us an interesting take on his suffering in Colossians 1:24. "Now I rejoice in what I am suffering for you, and I fill up in my flesh what is still lacking in regard to Christ's afflictions for the sake of his body, which is the church." This seems strange at first. We know Jesus' afflictions, the pain he endured on the cross, bought our complete and total salvation. The work is done. There's nothing more we need to do to earn salvation. So why does Paul say he needs to fill up something that was lacking in regard to Jesus' afflictions? It's because he understands that part of partnering with God in advancing the gospel is also suffering along with Jesus. Jesus may have paid the price for our salvation, but he's given us the message to carry out to the world. There may be suffering as we toil alongside God, but there's also great joy as we see lives saved and transformed. The suffering that brought Paul to Galatia, the suffering that brought Joseph to Egypt, was matched by the great joy of seeing many lives saved. I know we were all disappointed last week when we found out my diagnosis of cancer. A lot of people saying it doesn't seem fair. Why do I have to go through cancer again when I've already had it before? And I know this season is going to be one with a lot of pain and a lot of hardships. But it can also be one with joy and peace. It can also be one with hope and love. I don't know what God is going to be doing during this time, but I do know that as we seek him, He will fill us with a greater portion of His Spirit and empower us to do more things than we ever thought we could. And we'll be there for each other too, and we'll help each other through this time. And in the meantime, it's okay to be angry or upset or confused. It's okay to cry out to God and ask why. Believe me, He gets that question a lot. But as we wrap up our series on Joseph, I want to leave you with some encouraging verses that Shant and Lori shared with me last week. 1 Corinthians 16:3. Be on your guard, stand firm in the faith, be courageous, be strong. Psalm 31:24. Be strong and take heart, all you who hope in the Lord. Isaiah 41:10. So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous hand. Deuteronomy 31:6. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them, for the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Even if things are difficult, I hope you have a week filled with joy and peace. And as always, if you ever need anything, I'm still just one phone call away.